Hi guys, it's me Ty here, and today I'm going to tell you what one of the guys I talked to that he went to revive an old Ford 8N that was probably like sitting outside 20 years, and um, I know there's a lot of videos on getting them running, but this one here is it was a totally different problem with this tractor to get it to run right and everything and to revive it than any of the other Ford 8Ns I've seen. So I took lots of notes on my phone here, kind of wrote down the whole story that he went through on this ordeal. Um, so yeah, it was a Ford 8N tractor, and it hadn't been started for many years, and it had no radiator cap on it, and the mice had ate the ignition wiring. So the radiator was just filled with leaves and dirt and all that other crap, and probably sticks from the tree branches and all that. Um, yeah, like I said, the mice ate the ignition wiring, which they did on my grandpa's dozer too. It you can hook up the we hooked up the battery and nothing happens. So he wired it up to run like a test stand for carbureted engines. They use that with like demolition derby cars because there's absolutely no wiring in those cars. They're putting totally different engines in those demolition derby cars. And then also the salvage yards will do that as well sometimes when they get in cars, all the wiring's ripped out of them and everything. They can set the engine on the floor of the shop, just in the concrete floor, and they can just wire up a few different little things to get that engine to have spark and run. And then also Fabriat's YouTube channel, they revived this. They have this video called "The Yellow Submarine." They revived this boat that had sunk like 33 years ago in like Lake Powell or something, and they pulled it out of there. And amazingly, the engine. I don't think the engine was locked up or whatever, but yeah, they were able to get it started right on the ground. They pulled it out of the boat, set it on their driveway, and just hooked a few little wires up to it so that it would have spark, and they got it running. So definitely check that out, you guys. And then um, any other YouTube videos you need to look at of how to get an engine running that's just freestanding in your driveway with no car with it. Just how to build an engine test stand station or something for carbureted engines. Um, so yeah, anyways, that's what he had to do because he couldn't crank the engine. There was no electricity there. Um, Yep, and he used a push button handheld starter like you buy from Harbor Freight. So you can crank from the engine bay, which I have one of those. I think I paid like $6. Um, the engine was not locked up, so he was lucky there. So he didn't have to spray any PB blaster or diesel fuel in the cylinders and rock the tractor back and forth with the transmission in the highest gear, because that's how we usually unlock engines um, where the piston rings have rusted just from sitting so many years. So he got lucky there. Um, he did check the compression on all four of the cylinders with the compression gauge, and all four of them were at about 121 psi, so that was all good. So mechanically, the engine was good. Um, he removed the carburetor and he cleaned it up really good uh, because he was worried about rust in the gas tank. So what he did is he wired up an engine oil funnel with a rubber gas hose from the funnel to the carburetor, and would just fill the funnel with gas as his gas tank. It actually worked out pretty good. You would think it would tip over, but it didn't. Um, he pulled all the spark plugs and cleaned them, but they were not getting spark when he would crank the engine over, or use one of those little spark testers from Harbor Freight. You can buy them for like $6. I have one of those too, and they work pretty darn slick when you're trying to crank and or pull start an engine. You can't be over there holding a spark plug up to the engine block, seeing if it'll spark. So those things are definitely worth the money, you guys. Um, what else did he do? Um, yeah, like so they weren't getting spark. So then he replaced the ignition coil, and he still had no spark. Because usually on a lot of these old engines, it's your fuel pump is always bad or the ignition coil is bad, one or the other. When of the reason these engines got parked and the people didn't know what was wrong with them, that's usually what it was. And then also like shortly after firing up these engines, the ignition coil will fail or the fuel pump will go out just because it's been staying so long and all the gaskets in it, the diaphragm is dried out, and then it won't suck. So, um, yep, like I said, he replaced the ignition coil, still had no spark. Then he pulled the distributor cap off and used emery cloth on the 4 contact points under the cap and then on top to the 4 contact points. And then he emery clothed off the actual ignition points and made sure the points were opening and closing while he was cranking it, because that's what gives your engine spark. It then had spark, and he was able to get it started with starting fluid with ether. Um, but it was still surging and wanted to die when he would give it more throttle. So he said, we were always taught that in order for an engine to run, you got to have 3 things. You got to have compression, spark, and you got to have fuel. But you also need a 4th thing called timing. That everything has to spark at the exact right moment and on the correct cylinders. So um, then he bought a top dead center whistle. Uh, and a top dead center whistle, what that is it actually looks like a steam train whistle or whatever with a hose, and it's like a compression gauge. You just screw it into one of your cylinders, and when it's on its compression stroke, all the way up the compression stroke, as you're cranking it by hand, it'll whistle, it'll make a noise until it doesn't whistle, and that means that it hit top dead center and it's coming back down. So he bought one of those, and I'm gonna have to check on eBay or Harbor Freight of who sells one of those because I'm sure they're only like $6, and I think I want one of those. Um, okay. So yeah, he bought that whistle and he screwed it into cylinder number 2, and it alerts you when that cylinder is on the compression stroke and quits whistling when you hit TDC. Um, and he found out the distributor was timed correctly, um, because the distributor arm inside the cap was sitting on the number 2 written on the cap. Um, and he had screwed it into cylinder number 2, so that was good. But um, but he found out that the spark plug wire from number 2 on that cap was running to cylinder number 3. So someone had mixed up the spark plug wires on the engine. So he hooked them up in the correct firing order. He went online and found out what the proper firing order for this engine is. And this is an inline 4-cylinder. So I'm sure that number 1 cylinder is for this forward one. Then number 2 is right behind it. Then number 3, and then number 4 is your furthest back cylinder on the engine block, number 4. So, um, yep. So yeah, he hooked up the spark plug wires correct, so they were all in the right firing order. Next, he set the points gap with a feeler gauge, and then he set the dwell on the distributor with a dwell meter. And a dwell meter, that determines how long the points remain closed when that cylinder is on its TDC, top dead center. Um, uh, his uh, his dwell that he tested his were like a 16 dwell instead of like 13 or 14 dwell is what he wanted. So he adjusted the points gap to change the dwell. And see here, I think that how he was saying of how you hook it up, I think you hook the dwell meter on your negative battery post, and then the other end of the dwell meter on the negative terminal on your ignition coil. And I believe those ignition coils have 2 posts, a positive post and a negative post. Um, then he cranked the engine up with ether, and it was still surging. And he was like, I wonder if the bearing on the distributor shaft is bad and causing the dwell to change when it's running because the shaft is constantly wobbling. And then that'll cause your points um, to, to kind of wobble back and forth. Um, because, yeah. So, yep. So he pulled the distributor out, and the shaft wobbled just a little bit. So he bought a brand new distributor, and the shaft was nice and tight on it. It didn't wobble at all. So, and I guess you'd probably check the end play too, but I know with his it was wobbling back and forth. So, um, and he said what happens is that bearing, the ball bearing in it or whatever goes bad. So, um, he installed it and it fired right up and it purrs like a kitten now. So, um, he also just added plain water to the radiator since it had leaves and other dirt in it. Then he pulled the lower radiator hose off and stuck a garden hose in there to get all the junk out. He also changed the engine oil right away because he was afraid of antifreeze being in the bottom of the oil pan from sitting all those years. And then he had to turn on the PTO to be able to raise his 3-point arm since this tractor doesn't have live hydraulics. And he said he will probably add an inline fuel filter between the carburetor. Um, yeah, before the carburetor. I think you can buy those at Napa for like $3 or $6. They're clear, so you can see if there's fuel in there. And he plans to clean the gas tank with white vinegar and then slosh new engine oil around in the tank so it doesn't flash rust. And then he ran a lawn air hose out of his shop and he had his 80-gallon air compressor turned up to 150 psi to get those tires to inflate quick. Um, and then normally when a vehicle has been sitting for years, the fuel pump or coil pack are bad and the seals dried up or they fail shortly after. It seems like it's always a bad fuel pump on automotive revival videos. So, and which that's something I noticed. Like I said, I love watching automotive videos of bringing an old car that's been sitting for 20 years out in the tree rows, or old four wheelers, or old dirt bikes. Um, uh, yeah, just heavy equipment, but all that stuff. But it seems like every single one of them, that the mechanical fuel pump or the electric fuel pump, that they're always bad. And from what people have told me of why, like even like my grandparents, we had tons of cars and our old pickups, we pushed them up on the hill because um, they just they just quit running. And back in those days, we didn't have YouTube videos of how to troubleshoot this stuff. Nobody knew that much about engines and all that. So we parked them up there, and for the most part, I'm sure either the ignition coil went out, and all that was is $50, but we would have never known, or else the fuel pump went out or was going bad. Just if it has not quite enough pressure, that engine won't run right or won't start and stay running. So um, I hope this helps you guys to get your Ford 8N tractors back up and running, or if you guys buy one that's been sitting outside for years. So um, yeah, heck, my grandpa's even got old tractors and stuff that he bought and they never did run, and he just pulled them out there, and it'd be fun to get those running. So all right, if you guys like this video, like, share, and subscribe, and I'll just keep kicking out videos. Since this channel here is not just about my travels in Asia, it's about saving you guys money. It's about yeah, doing automotive repairs and four-wheeler repairs, just getting stuff up and running, since that's what I like to do. And then also like home repairs and stuff like that too. So kind of do it yourself or channel. So all right, take care, you guys.